The first bank in human history wasn't a building with marble columns and a vault. It was a temple full of grain. And the first bankers weren't men in suits, they were priests. Which means the entire global financial system, the trillions of dollars moving around the planet right now, your savings account, your credit card, all of it traces back to a guy in a robe 5,000 years ago, guarding piles of barley. And here's the part nobody tells you. Banking wasn't invented because somebody wanted to get rich. It was invented to solve a problem so basic, so painfully human, that the moment you hear it, you'll wonder why nobody explained it to you this way before. The problem was this: where do you put your stuff? Sounds stupid, right? But go back 5,000 years to ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, and think about what life actually looked like. You're a farmer. Your entire wealth is grain. Not coins, not paper, grain. Actual sacks of barley. And grain has three terrible qualities. It rots, it gets eaten by rats, and it gets stolen. So you've worked all year, you've harvested your crop, and now you're sitting on a pile of wealth that's literally decaying in front of you, while every thief in the region knows exactly where it is. Your house has mud walls. You have no police, no locks worth anything. What do? You look around the city for the one building nobody dares to rob: the temple. Think about how clever this is. The temple was the biggest, strongest building in the city. It had guards. It had walls. But more importantly, it had something no fortress could buy: fear. Stealing from a temple wasn't theft. It was robbing the gods. And in a world where everyone genuinely believed the gods could ruin your harvest, kill your children, and curse your bloodline, nobody wanted to test that. The temple was protected by the best security system ever invented: belief.
So farmers started bringing their grain to the temples for safekeeping. And the priests, being organized people, did something that changed history. They wrote it down. They pressed marks into wet clay tablets. This farmer deposited this much barley on this day. That clay tablet was a record of a deposit, which makes it, as far as we know, the birth of the bank account. 5,000 years ago, written in mud. But here's where it gets interesting, because the moment you have deposits, something strange starts to happen. Something the priests probably didn't even plan. The temple is now sitting on mountains of grain, way more than anyone is taking out on any given day. And meanwhile, outside the temple walls, there's a farmer whose crop failed. He's desperate. He needs seed grain to plant next season, or his family starves. He comes to the temple and asks, "Can I borrow some?" And the priests think about it. The grain is just sitting there. Most of it never gets claimed all at once. So they say yes, you can borrow this much barley. But, and this is the moment everything changes, you have to pay back more than you took. That right there is the invention of the loan, and the invention of interest. And the Sumerians even had a word for it: mash, which literally meant baby animals, because that's how they understood it. If you lend someone a herd, the herd comes back bigger, it has babies. So if you lend someone grain, the grain should come back bigger too. Interest wasn't some evil scheme cooked up by bankers. It started as a farming metaphor. Wealth, they figured, should breed. So now look at what exists: deposits, records, loans, interest. That's not a warehouse anymore. That's a bank, operating thousands of years before anyone had ever seen a coin. And that's the detail that should mess with your head. We always assume money came first and banking came after. It's the opposite. Banking is older than money. Humans were taking deposits and making loans before cash even existed. But the system had a problem, a big one. Everything ran on grain and silver by weight. Every single transaction meant weighing things out, checking quality, arguing about purity. Trade was slow and clunky. Therefore, somewhere around 2,600 years ago, in a kingdom called Lydia, in modern-day Turkey, somebody had the next big idea. Take a lump of precious metal, stamp the king's mark on it, and guarantee its weight and purity: the coin. And the coin did something subtle but enormous. It moved trust from the thing to the symbol. You no longer had to trust the metal, you trusted the stamp. The king's face on a coin was him saying, "I promise this is worth what it says." Remember that word, promise. Because this entire story, from the first temple to your banking app, is just promises getting more and more abstract. Now coins spread everywhere, trade explodes, and banking grows up with it. The Greeks had money changers sitting at tables in the marketplace. The Romans built a whole financial industry. And the Greek word for those tables, and later the Italian word banco, meaning bench,
is literally where the word bank comes from. The first banks were just guys sitting at benches handling money. And by the way, when one of those money dealers went broke, his bench was smashed. Broken bench. In Italian, banca rota, which is where we get the word bankrupt. The language we use about money today is just the furniture of ancient marketplaces. But coins created a brand new problem. And this is where the story takes a turn most people never hear about. Coins are heavy. Coins are stealable. If you're a merchant in the Middle Ages and you need to move serious money across Europe, you've got a wagon full of silver rolling through forests crawling with bandits. Moving wealth was so dangerous that it was strangling trade. Therefore, somebody had to solve the same ancient problem all over again. Where do you put your stuff? And the answer, incredibly, was the same answer the Mesopotamians found. A temple, sort of. In the 1100s, the safest organization in Europe was a group of warrior monks called the Knights Templar. They had castles everywhere. They were feared in battle, and they answered to the Pope. So they offered a service. Say you're a pilgrim traveling from London to Jerusalem. Carrying gold the whole way is basically a death sentence. Instead, you deposit your money with the Templars in London. They hand you a document, and when you arrive in Jerusalem, you show the document at the Templar house there and withdraw your money. Stop and think about what that is. You put money in at one location and take it out at another, using a piece of paper. That's not just a bank. That's an international bank with branches, run by monks 900 years ago. Your money traveled across a continent without ever physically moving. The paper moved, the trust moved, the gold stayed put. And once people realized the paper could stand in for the gold, the next step was almost inevitable. But it took one more group to find it, and they found it almost by accident: goldsmiths. In the 1600s, wealthy people in London needed somewhere safe to store their gold, and goldsmiths had the best vaults in the city. So, same old story. People deposited their gold, and the goldsmith handed them a paper receipt. Bring back the receipt, get your gold. But then something funny happened. People stopped coming back for the gold. Why bother? If you owed somebody money, it was easier to just hand them the receipt. The receipt was the claim on the gold, so the receipt was as good as the gold. People started paying each other in receipts, while the actual gold just sat in the vault, gathering dust. And those receipts, passing from hand to hand, backed by metal nobody ever looked at, were the birth of paper money as we know it. And then the goldsmiths noticed the same thing the Sumerian priests had noticed 4,000 years earlier. Almost nobody ever shows up to claim their stuff at the same time. So they started lending out gold that technically belonged to their depositors. And then they went one step further, a step that still powers the entire world economy today. They started writing receipts for gold that didn't exist at all. If they had 100 coins in the vault, they might issue receipts for several hundred, betting that everyone would never come asking at once. They were creating money out of thin air, with ink. That sounds like fraud. Honestly, the first time you hear it, it should sound like fraud. But that exact mechanism, lending out more than you hold, is how virtually every bank on Earth works right now, today. It's called fractional reserve banking. When you deposit money, the bank doesn't lock it in a box with your name on it. It keeps a fraction and lends the rest out. The number in your banking app isn't your money sitting somewhere. It's the bank's promise that you can have it back. The system works beautifully. Loans get made, businesses get built, economies grow. Right up until the one day everybody panics and asks for their money at the same time. We call that a bank run. And it's the same nightmare a Sumerian priest would have had if every farmer in the city showed up demanding their barley on the same morning. 5,000 years, and the fundamental gamble has never changed. So now zoom out and look at the whole arc, because it's actually one single story. A farmer trusts a priest with his grain. A trader trusts a king's stamp on a coin. A pilgrim trusts a monk's piece of paper. A merchant trusts a goldsmith's receipt. And you trust a number on a glowing screen. Every era, the wealth gets more invisible. Grain you could eat, gold you could hold, paper you could fold. And now, digits. Most of the money in the world today doesn't exist in any physical form at all. It can't be touched because there's nothing to touch. It's entries in databases, promises stacked on promises stacked on promises, going all the way down to a temple in Mesopotamia. Here's the part nobody talks about. Banking was never really about money. It can't be because it existed before money did. Banking is about something older and more fragile. It's about strangers finding a way to trust each other. The temple, the coin, the receipt, the app, Every single one is just a tool for letting people who don't know each other make promises and believe they'll be kept. That's the actual invention, not the vault, the trust. And the wildest part? It still runs on belief, exactly like it did at the beginning. The Mesopotamian farmer trusted the temple because he believed in the gods. You trust your bank because you believe in regulators, in insurance, in the system. Different gods, same faith. The next time you tap your card and watch a number change on a screen, remember what you're actually doing. You're performing a ritual that started 5,000 years ago, with a nervous farmer, a pile of barley, and a priest who decided to write it all down.
The buildings changed. The robes became suits. But the bank was never the building. It was always the belief.